say that you're present. Ms. Anderson Blanks. Mayor Cantor.
Here.
Mr. Sweeney.
Here.
Ms. Kerrigan. Mr. Winograd. Mr. Williams. Ms. Fay.
Here.
And Mr. Gold. And Mr. Gold.
Present. Here.
Nice. So let the record reflect that all members of the council are currently present except for Ms. Anderson Blanks, Mr. Winograd, and Ms. Kerrigan. Okay, so we just wrapped up an executive session. We're coming back in, and first item of business will be to move agenda item 3A, which is the executive session material, and I'll move to ratify the settlement of the tax appeal filed by the owner of property located at 23 Jillian Circle, which provides that the fair market value of the property on the 2019 and 2020 grand list years is $765,000. Is there any debate or questions or comments? Seeing none, we'll call for a vote. But as advised by Deputy Corporation Counsel Verano, only the committee members can vote. So that would be Mr. Sweeney, Ms. Fay, and myself. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Ms. Fay, are you voting in the affirmative or in the negative?
In the affirmative.
Thank you.
Was an aye.
Okay, I couldn't hear you.
Okay.
The motion passes unanimously 3-0. Thank you. The next item is 3B, the meeting minutes of February 16th, 2021. They're there not to be voted on, just to be received. Does anyone have any corrections or amendments to the minutes? Mr. Hart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A question for Ms. LeBreau. I thought we had changed the process and we were asking standing committees to approve the minutes as opposed to the full council.
Yes.
Okay, with that said, I'll seek a motion to approve the minutes of February 16th, 2021. Mr. Sweeney,
So moved.
is there a second? Ms. Fay?
Second.
Moved in second. Is there further comment? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion carries unanimously. In the interest of fairness to the other staff members present this evening, the manager has asked that I adjust the agenda to accommodate our directors and professional staff to not have to sit through the entire meeting if they choose not to, but if they do choose to do so, that's fine as well. So we're going to start with item number 5A, which would be the assessor's report. Mr. Dakers. Good evening, sir.
Joe, we had to mute your line. You can unmute, please.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank the committee for giving me the opportunity to give them a brief overview of the revaluation as it stands today. As you may recall, last year we started by issuing some data mailers back in May of 2020. Approximately 20,790 data mailers were sent out. And I'm happy to say that we have over 60% of them back, which is great for our performance requirements once the revaluation is completed. There are a number of inspections that are required as a result of change information that was reported in those data mailers. So field inspections for verification are taking place as I speak. The next phase of that process is with the analysis of values and sales information. That is taking place concurrently with the other activity. And I think it's important to note, particularly with the very active real estate market that we find ourselves in, to preface my remarks by saying that during the 2016 revaluation, we were experiencing annual appreciation rates of about 2.5% a month, annualized at 27%. And I'm happy to say that we are not even remotely close to that level of annualized appreciation as we stand right now. The assessor's office tracks home sales annually and compares them to the assessments developed for those homes during the last townwide revaluation. These comparisons are called sale assessment ratios. These ratios are an indicator in the assessment to determine whether, in the assessment field, to determine whether or not housing prices in our jurisdiction or town are rising or falling. Sale assessment ratios for home sales from our last townwide revaluation date of October 1st, 2016 through the beginning of COVID-19 in early 2020 showed the overall house price in town were overall house prices in town were relatively unchanged for the last 3 years. Since the economy began to open back up in mid-2020 through the end of 2020, our ratios indicated overall house prices in town increased on a slightly less than 1% per month in the second half of 2020. Our ratios now indicate that house prices have averaged an increase of 1% per month so far in 2021. And please keep in mind that these are town-wide averages. There certainly have been much greater individual swings for values for particular homes that are mentioned based upon improvements to some properties or even the dynamics at play in some listings. I have a number of sales here, and I certainly can provide the committee with a printed report later to demonstrate what these values were in 2016 and what the ratios are on these sales today. And you're going to see them, they're all over the place. Some are as much as 5% more, some are 10% more, some are 8% more, and some are even 15% more. I've had tales of prices selling for as much as $40,000 over the asking price. But I will encourage you to have an appreciation for what happened in 2016 is not what's happening today. Our appreciation rates at this point in time is nowhere near 27% annually. Yes, we have a spike, and there are current rumors that the market is cooling down. We'll have to wait to see for the next 4 or 5 months what sales activity looks like. That is a snapshot of the West Hartford real estate market, and we certainly have been getting a lot of calls about the marketplace as it stands today. And I could see why there would be some concerns about that. But when we do this, we look at the entire real estate market. So we're going to end up with medians. We're going to end up with some things that are high and some things low. But I believe by October, things will start to feather out. It is too early to forecast what type of increase we will have for the 2021 revaluation because all of the data is not in. We just started on the commercial real estate. Annually, they filed income and expense reports with the town. That data just came in as of June 1st. So that analysis process is now underway. So it's too early to say what the impact on some of these commercial establishments are as a result of COVID. For example, I'm in constant conversation with the Taubman companies as it pertains to West Farms Mall. And right now they're holding their own, considering they sold about 80% of their interest in the plaza to Simon Properties. And there are other large commercial complexes like Corbin's Corner. Right now they seem to be holding their own. I will add on balance that there are other commercial or retail establishments that you really have to look behind the curtain to see what's going on because they have propped up the retailer that is in that place. But when you look at what they're doing with the rent schedules, they actually have reverted from a percentage rent basis to a minimum monthly rent. So they're actually taking in less revenue. And, we'll have to wait to see what happens. Another issue that I think is a burning issue in many minds is the sale of Blueback Square. And they registered that sale price in the town clerk records at $40 million. But we have some serious concerns about that number. A lot of it is based on the mortgage to loan value of the property. 55% is really high. It's not typical in a situation like that. If you convert that mortgage by the ratio of the mortgage, you're ending up with about $73 million in a sale price. So we have some concerns, and we're still plowing through that. At this point in time, we don't consider that to be an arm's length transaction, in spite of the fact that that was recorded in the town clerk's office. I have another one in town. This is a single family home that probably about 7 or 8 years ago, it sold for $4.5 million. The owner subsequently put about $2.5 million in renovations in the property. And he sold the property earlier this year. Well, I think it was $1.3 million. This is a 12,000 square foot home in town. And, you know, when we saw that, it was like, we cringed, because a lot of the larger home owners in town would be looking at that sale as a litmus test for the value that you arrive at on their property. But as it turns out, this owner received a lot of stock considerations that we call boot, that doesn't show up in the deed that they're boasting about. So we're getting more information on that. And right now, as far as the assessor's office is concerned, that is not an arm's length transaction. And we believe there's some similar activity with the Blueback Square, but more to come on that. I'll be happy to answer any questions that anyone might have.
Any questions for Mr. Dacre? I don't see any, but I do have one, Mr. Dacre.
Sure.
And I think it's a question I probably asked a few years ago. Well, probably it was in 2016. So when there's an abundance of properties for sale in town, and sales are being made, and we're seeing these properties listed online, and now with the internet, you're seeing very detailed pictures. You're seeing pretty vivid descriptions of what the property has. So do we in our assessor's office match these real estate listings against the card that you have in your office to see if it matches up in respect to the value?
Well, we absolutely do. We have access to the MLS as a result of one of our appraisers who's eligible to get access to the MLS. We've had it in this department since I've been here, so it's over 20 years. And when we get a sale, if it hits the MLS, we'll compare that information against what we have on our property record card. Oftentimes, we'll pick up a bathroom or some other kind of finished space, maybe a finished attic that we had is unfinished, or an unfinished basement or finished basement that we had is unfinished. And we also record the asking prices and the ultimate sale prices to kind of gauge the ratios of what the property is selling for from what the original asking price is for. Now, traditionally, what we found is that we were somewhere in the area of between 5 and maybe 7% of the asking price that they would actually gain from the sale. Of course, now it's flipped. In some cases, as much as 10, 15% higher than what you find on the MLS. My son and my daughter-in-law, they've been looking for a property for over a year. And every time that they get into a transaction, they're outbidded by as much as $20,000 or $25,000. It's kind of discouraging for the young home buyers, but we do utilize that service. We don't do much with Realtor.com. We actually use the MLS, and we give that a lot more credibility than some of the other sources, because we don't know how they gather their data. But we certainly take a look at that stuff.
Thank you. And then I just have one follow-up question. So in my neck of the woods in the north end here, I've noticed, I don't know, 8 to 10 houses that surround where I live. So maybe people don't want to be my neighbor or something, and or other people want to be my neighbor and they're moving into this area. But these prices, as you pointed out earlier, were really 50, 60, 80, maybe $100,000 greater than asking. And as somebody who's not moving, right, what do we tell those types of homeowners? How is that going to affect your value? Because you didn't put your house on the market, but you're going to be in that entire mix with people.
Well, one sale doesn't make a market, as we all know.
Right.
But you're absolutely right. We will look at all of these sales and we will measure them. So we're not going to anchor ourselves on outliers. So we're going to find out what these medians are, and we're certainly cognizant of some of those hyper markets. A lot of it is simply supply and demand economics. As the COVID-19 started, we started to see a drying up of inventory for sale. I suspect a lot of the realtors went looking for some other kind of job during that time span. But now we're starting to see, certainly in West Hartford, the days on the market typically is 40 to 45 days, and now I think it's less than 30 days because of the hyper market that we're in. But I'm seeing a lot more homes for sale on the market. So I think we're moving back to where we were normally. In terms of the your neighbors who are asking you questions about this, we're looking at the entire market. We're just not looking at one sale to determine the values in the neighborhood. So otherwise, if we did that, Councilman, our performance ratios would be skewed, and the state would send us back to the drawing board because we have some norms that we have to adhere to in terms of, and I don't want to get into too much of this, but we have coefficients of dispersion that we have to meet. And there are several other levels of performance that we have to meet. And if we don't meet these, the state throws them back in our lap. And we have to look at these values again to make the necessary adjustments in order to be in compliance with those regulations.
Thank you. I appreciate that answer. And I have just one last question. So people will be getting a new assessed value for their property in the upcoming year, correct?
That is correct, sir. We will be sending our notices out this October, and we will have conferences that start around mid-October, around the 16th, I believe it is, and they will run through the 23rd of December. So homeowners will have an opportunity, if they so choose, to come in and ask questions about the new value on their property, and certainly point out any discrepancies. And if those discrepancies exist in terms of the listing information, then we will make corrections at that time before we release the final assessment notices.
And just to follow up on that, with respect to the Board of Assessment Appeals, do you know if that is fully staffed with citizens serving?
Well, I'm glad you asked me that question. We are actually down one person. We just had one person who, because COVID is kind of rolling back now, their travel requirements with their employer have increased. And so it's very difficult for him to keep up with the schedule that the Board of Assessment Appeals requires. So we are in the market for a replacement, and hopefully we can get someone in here before September to fill out the complement of the board. We're going to be busy doing any revaluation assessment appeal cycle.
Well, thank you for that. And if anyone's watching, obviously there's an opportunity to get involved in the community. And if this is something that interests you and you have the expertise in this type of field and would like to lend your service to the town, we would most greatly appreciate that. And people can either contact our town clerk or our mayor to express their interest in serving, and it would be greatly appreciated. Anyone else have any questions for Mr. Dacres this evening? Seeing and hearing none. Thank you, Mr. Dacres, for your time. Greatly appreciated. Good to see you again, sir.
You're welcome.
The next item on the agenda is staff reports, human resources report. That would be Mr. Ledwith. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, committee chair and committee members. Rick Ledwith, Executive Director of Human Resources, and I'll start by highlighting a few key updates within our department, and then can certainly answer any questions that the committee had. First, in terms of recruitments, as you can see, we're currently recruiting for police and fire, and those recruitments consistently happen throughout the year. Those are our two largest departments, and there's not many times throughout any given year where we're not recruiting for a police officer or a firefighter. We also have a department promotion opportunity within the Public Works Department that we're presently recruiting for. And with the last budget that the council adopted, you may recall there were several positions that were approved through that process, which we will be recruiting for as we move into the summer months. So we'll certainly keep the committee apprised of those recruitments once they commence. In terms of our workers' compensation program, as committee members may know, we are currently self-insured with a self-insured retention limit of $600,000, and that is through Safety National. So what that means is we're responsible for the first $600,000 of any workers' compensation claim, and then Safety National picks up the risk after we hit $600,000. Safety National approached all of their municipal clients recently to inform them that they'll be carving out a separate self-insured retention limit for public safety. And that limit would increase to $750,000. So our risk manager has gone out to bid in conjunction with our broker because of that fact. And the bids are all due in this week. So we'll review those bids, and we would potentially make a move from Safety National if we're able to find a carrier that will meet our current $600,000 limit without a significant increase in premiums. So we'll keep the committee updated on that process as we move through it. Also wanted to update the committee on recent negotiation efforts, but as a council, you're well aware that last month you ratified a 3-year contract with the police department, police union, and that was for 7/1/21 through 6/30/24. We're finalizing the contract language with that contract right now and should have it ready for the town manager's signature within the next week. Last week, the council ratified 6 Csea contracts, and all of those, as you may remember from last week, were retroactive to July 1st of 2017 and do in fact expire at the end of this month on June 30th. So we will look to continue to negotiate a successor extension on that agreement once we hit July. We also have a contract with our ASME unit, which is our streets division within our Public Works Department, and that contract expired a year later than the Csea agreement expired. So that one only goes back to July 1st, not only, but it goes back to July 1st of 2018. We're working on negotiations with that unit right now and hope to have something before the council relatively soon. Also wanted to update the committee on our diversity, equity, and inclusion work, which is, as you know, a very important initiative that we are undertaking as an organization. You may recall that we have engaged the services of Csea Consulting to assist us with this training, and our goal has been to provide education and awareness at every level of the organization. So it began with the directors last fall, and we had 4 3-hour training sessions with our directors, and then we moved that training back down into our manager and supervisor level. And we recently concluded the training with our managers and supervisors just a couple of weeks ago. So at this point, we're working on a plan to push this work down through all of our employees at every level of the organization. And we'll work on that plan as we move into the summer with Csea Consulting. Continuing with the DEI theme, the committee knows the current budget did include funding for a new DEI officer, which is very exciting. Interesting stat out there, there are over 4,600 chief diversity officer positions opened around the country. So our colleagues around the state and around the country are all engaging their employees in this work as well. So This new hire, this new employee will serve as a strategic partner to our town manager and our management team with a focus on leveraging diversity, equity, and inclusion to drive our mission both internally throughout the organization and then throughout the community as well. We're finalizing a job description and hope to begin that recruitment process formally later this summer. So again, we'll keep the committee apprised of those efforts. And then one last item for the committee, we're finishing up our work on a new hire orientation video that will help educate new employees about various town departments. So right now, each of our directors are giving a brief 3 to 5 minute introduction of their respective departments on video. And we're fortunate to have Jen Evans from WHCI TV working with us and helping us film those introductions. And we should have that completed within the next couple of weeks. And that will become part of our formal orientation process as we're onboarding new hires. So pretty excited about that as well. That concludes all of our updates on the major items for this month. Be happy to answer any questions that the committee had.
Does anyone have any questions of Mr. Ledwith? Seeing or hearing none, I do, Mr. Ledwith. In your report, you mentioned the development of the intranet for our employees to be able to access, I guess, various things that they would need to know with respect to benefits and other portions of their employment with the town. Can you give an update as to where that stands?
Yep. So we have been working on that with our IT department. We fortunately have Jared Morin on the call with us tonight, so he could help with this as well. So it will be a site that our employees will be able to access to, as you said, committee chair, to access various policies, access various benefits. We're also in the process of rolling out a Munis, well, we've rolled out our Munis program. So I know IT is looking at the combination of both the Munis program and the design of this intranet page. So it's still in that stage of the process. So more to follow on that. I don't know, Jared, if you had anything further on that, if he's listening still.
Sure, Director Morin here. It's kind of a two-part situation for current employees. They have the employee service portal, which is through Munis. That's live, and we have pretty much everything loaded in there for our current employees. For employees that don't have an account quite yet, we're developing a website that they can still access for that very, very initial onboarding documentation and paperwork that they need. So we're very close.
Thank you, Jared.
Super. Thank you for your responses, and thank you for your participation here this evening. Appreciate it, Mr. Ledwith.
Thank you.
Next is Mr. Morin, the Information Technology report. Good evening, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Committee Chair, Jared Morin, Director of Technology. Attached to the agenda is my staff report with some talking points, but I'd really like to highlight just a few and then happy to answer questions that any of you may have. One project we're currently working on is multi-factor authentication. This is also known as two-factor authentication. You're probably familiar, basically every bank does it. So you're probably familiar with it if your bank makes you do it, where you get a text message and then you can log in. It'll require those two vectors to authenticate with certain systems, not every. So like VPN, outside access to email. It should be online by September 1st. This is per the recommendation of our auditors and also a requirement now of cybersecurity insurance. It wasn't a requirement before, but now it is. So that should be online by September. Another summer project we're working on is a new help desk system. This is really exciting because it's going to use single sign-on, so you don't have to remember so many passwords. It'll just recognize your Google account. It'll recognize your Active Directory account when you log into Windows. And it also does leading questions to help users basically more easily report their technical issues. And it integrates with our inventory. It has chat and calendar integration for scheduling remote assistance to resolve issues more quickly. So I think Users will really appreciate it. Our current system's a little troublesome. And the good news also is it saves $10,000 a year, so that's great. Another thing I would like to highlight, speaking of Google, is Google for Government. So it's something we've been talking about for a couple of years now. If implemented, it would replace our town email system. It would improve document sharing, especially larger files, not only internally, but also with the public and committees, improve online collaboration, provide more interoperability with the schools, which are already on Google. It will also lead to potential savings of consolidating systems we host on premise, like our current email system and file servers. So that's exciting, and we're still working on like a final quote that I will prepare for manager Matt, so he can bring it to you. And lastly, starting tomorrow, we are performing some site visits with vendors to develop a proposal for guest wireless service in all of our parks and other public spaces. So that's exciting because we're looking at 5G, which will limit some fiber construction costs. And I'll be happy to bring that forward for potential funding sources through the town manager once complete. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Moran. Any questions of Mr. Moran or any of my colleagues with respect to information technology? I don't see or hear any. I do have a question. So we've been issued an iPad that has video and audio capability, but it never had the ability to use a pen to do notes on it. And I'm wondering, do you think we could get there somehow?
That's a great question, and it's timely as we have a demo tomorrow with another product that I know the town clerk is very excited about, and it's very possible that their product will have that functionality. The incumbent system promised that functionality and never got there, so it's just one of our list of issues, but it's coming, I hope.
I'll remain optimistic that it will be there. Appreciate it. Thank you for joining us here this evening, and thank you for your report, sir.
Thank you.
The next item is 5D, the town clerk's report. Ms. LeBreau.
Thank you, Essie LeBreau, Town Clerk. The May office activity's been really busy, still in the real estate in terms of the number of land recordings. I have seen in the last couple of weeks it's sort of leveling off. It's comparable to last June. So I'm still hoping for those big conveyances to come through those because I like those. And I think we're going to end up the year with a nice revenue increase over what we had planned. Dog licensing started, and we are in the process of doing 3,000 dog licenses. We've received probably 1,500 so far, and I expect another 1,000 by the end of June. I'm really wishing and hoping that we will be accepting online payments next year. So this will be the last time we're doing manual dog licensing transactions. So that's on my wish list. We're also doing a number of in-person transactions. The greeter in the lobby has been great. It's helped kept our traffic flow to acceptable rates. And as Jared alluded to, we've been researching agenda management systems that really have more of an enhanced capability that Board Docs is not able to accommodate. And we've looked at 3 different companies, and we are having one of the finalists present tomorrow to Matt Hart, Town Manager, a member of Jared and IT staff, and Renee McHugh as well, because we expect this product to be more integrated with our website so that we're not separating items on Board Docs than items on the website. So it'll be a lot easier to find information. There's also a boards and commissions module that we have never had. Right now, our boards and commissions are pretty much administered utilizing Excel spreadsheets and all type, more that type of manual process. And this way, the boards and commissions would have, it would be greater transparency to the public. in seeing terms and also in the administration of it. Letters can be generated automatically. And so there's a lot of little pieces in there that are that would be really helpful and will cut down on the being duplicated as we are doing them now. So it is also a lot more cost effective than I thought it was going to be. When I first started looking at some of these products, I really thought it was going to be price prohibitive, but they are very much in the same cost as board docs, and some even a little less, while providing our users, both our department, our town employees, our directors, and our residents in finding documents much easier. So that's the hope with this new system that we're being reviewed right now. The other things we'll be looking at down the road this summer, not that I'm going to take the summer off, but there's a new death registry system that the state is rolling out in July. And in August, they are rolling out a new voter registration system. So we are going to be pretty busy. That's all I have. If there's any questions.
Thank you, Ms. LeBreau. Any questions of our town clerk, Ms. LeBreau? Seeing
And excuse me, Councilor Davidoff, your pens are on the list because I specifically asked that question. So tomorrow we're going to, so.
I appreciate it.
I'm thinking that it's on my top 10 list. So
I appreciate it. It would make it a lot more user friendly. I don't have a question. I do have a comment, and it's a comment that's complimentary. I was speaking with a resident over the weekend, and they wanted to just say that they were treated very professionally and efficiently by your staff over the past 2 weeks, and they appreciated all the assistance they were able to get. It was performed in a very efficient and professional manner. So on behalf of myself and my colleagues, thank you to you and your staff for representing our town so well with people that interact.
thank you. I will pass that on to my staff. Thank you.
And thank you for your report this evening. Which brings us to our last staff report, but not the end of our agenda, and that would be Mr. Hart's town manager's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Matt Hart, Town Manager. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us at tonight's meeting. I'd like to thank all of our staff and directors for their good comprehensive reports this evening. Just a few items that I want to touch on. I believe the council is probably everyone is aware the budget adopted by the legislature last week does do a lot with respect to municipal aid. There was actually a 3.8% increase in municipal aid overall. And for West Hartford, all of the statutory grant estimates that we had included for purposes of the council's adopted budget remained in place. And as you may recall, that represented an increase in the education cost sharing grant, as well as additional payment in lieu of taxes pilot funding. In aggregate, I think state aid is roughly $1 million more than what we receive for the current fiscal year. So that's certainly good news for us and for other municipalities around the state. I know the General Assembly is in session today, working on the budget implementer bill. One thing I did note there is a section of that bill that would increase the per capita grant to our regional health districts pretty significantly on a percentage basis. The proposal is to increase that per capita grant from $1.90 to $2.60, so $2.60. I haven't calculated yet what that would do for a West Hartford share, but that's certainly good news from the state as well. Those are the items I wanted to touch on, Mr. Chairman, for purposes of tonight's discussion. And as you said at the beginning, I want to spend the bulk of my time talking about the rescue plan and our other agenda items.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. Does anyone have any questions of Mr. Hart with respect to the items he just mentioned? Seeing and hearing none, we'll just move back now to item number 3C, 3D, and 3E, which is the current year projection, discussion about the pension obligation bonds, and the major item is the use of the American Rescue Plan funds. So, Mr. Hart, I'll turn it over to you, and if you want to, either you or Mr. Privatera will proceed at that point.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Matt Hart, Town Manager. We have certainly good news on our current year projection. It continues to improve as it has throughout the fiscal year. I do want to credit our directors and our team early on in this fiscal year, as council may recall. We did implement a spending freeze on discretionary spending, and that has certainly helped us out in other areas. And also revenues have improved as well. So through you, Mr. Chairman, I would now turn to Mr. Privatera to discuss the current year projection, take any questions you all may have on that, and then we can move to our pension obligation bonds update.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. Mr. Privatera, good evening, sir.
I think you're muted, Peter.
Was listening to all those great reports, you know. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and council members. Pete Privatera, Director of Finance. Just to put a little background to this, if you recall, when we adopted the current year budget, we adopted the budget with the intent on using $1.5 million of our unreserved fund balance. The last report I sent to the mayor and, to the manager and council, which you have a copy of, dated May 27th, indicated that of that 1.5 million, we only projected to need roughly $639,000 of that to close out the year. I'm happy to report that that number is down even further. We've been doing very well on our both tax and non-tax collection. We've already hit 99.3% on our collection rate. We're hoping to hit 99.4 by the end of the year. We're projecting roughly $1.2 million of additional tax revenue. We're doing great on conveyance tax. I think the last estimate I saw, we're about 40% over adopted. We're going to hit at least 10% over our building permit number. So things are looking up. We also had a discussion about not using any unreserved fund balance to balance out this year, but using some money from the American Rescue Act plan. So it's my intent that as we get closer to closing out this year, right now the number is about 400,000. My expectation is we'll get under that, roughly 200,000 to 300,000. I'll be coming back to council and asking for a transfer of the American Rescue Act funds to the general fund to balance out the year. That preserves the 1.5 million that we had transferred to CNRE. If you recall, we put that money in CNRE from surplus last year, and we were going to use that to balance out our fund balance. But that money is still in CNRE, and we're not going to use it. And the rating agencies are happy because now we are not using any fund balance. So we're going to continue to keep our eye on revenues. Expenditures are stable. Things are looking very well. Considering when we adopted the budget, we had some concerns. So, I'd be happy to take any questions on our projection for the year. But again, we're looking very well.
Thank you, Mr. Privatera, for that very positive update on our town finances and highlighting the areas as to where the deltas were. Anybody have any questions of Mr. Privatera? Seeing or hearing none, I guess not, Mr. Privatera. So thank you for that that concise report of the good news. So we'll move on to the next item, which would be an update on our pension obligation bonds.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Pete Privatera, Finance Director. We're getting very close. I attached a financing calendar to my report. Tomorrow we have a due diligence call with the Underwriters Council, basically to answer any questions they may have on any aspect of this sale. We had a ratings call with both Moody's and S&P. last week. Our expectation is we'll hear from them tomorrow, and they'll maintain our AAA rating with a stable outlook. Again, if you recall, when you passed the bond authorization ordinance, you gave us the authority to sell up to $365 million of pension obligation bonds. Right now, because of great performance in our pension fund of our investments, we're going to be selling $324.4 million of pension obligation bonds, which basically results in a significantly higher savings in our debt service on these bonds moving forward, which is great news as well. But as it stands right now, we're finishing up our preliminary official statement. We're finishing up what the underwriters refer to as a roadshow. What it is, it's a marketing document that's going to be distributed to potential investors, outlining all the attributes of the sale and characteristics of the town. And then on June 24th, we will be selling the bonds and closing the sale on July 8th. So everything is moving as it should. We're on schedule. It's starting to become very real now, and my expectation is that we will get a good rate when we go to market on these bonds. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Privatera. Anyone have any questions or comments for Mr. Privatera with respect to the pension obligation bonds? Hearing or seeing none, I'll just offer, it was nice to hear that you're optimistic that we'll be able to retain our AAA bond rating with a stable outlook, and the rate that we're going to be able to sell these at are in that same category as we initially had discussed. So two very positive things. Keep our fingers crossed that those things do happen in the next 2 weeks or so. So thank you for all your hard work on this, because it was a difficult concept to grasp and understand, but we appreciate all the people that were involved in educating us to make that decision that we ultimately made to go forward with this endeavor. So hopefully we're on the right course, and I do believe that we are. So thank you on that. And now for probably the thing that hopefully will generate more discussion than just having me speak, and others will chime in. The use of the American Rescue Plan funds. So Mr. Hart, did you want to offer some background and then possibly go from there?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Matt Hart, Town Manager. Yes, I'd be happy to do that. A little bit of a refresher regarding the allowable uses of the funds, what we have discussed in terms of guiding principles, a little bit about process we are recommending. And then through you, Mr. Chairman, I would ask Mr. Privatera, once I finish my opening remarks, he can talk a little bit about the amounts we've received to date, and breaking it down by fiscal year. And then I think anything additional he might want to add, then we can open it up for Q&A. So as a bit of a refresher for the council, recall under this watershed federal legislation, the town of West Hartford is receiving a sizable amount of money, a little over $25 million directly to the municipality. We've received half of that already. Another 10 million going directly to, approximately 10 million going directly to the school district. And then more recently, because Connecticut does not have county government, and because we are an entitlement community with a population of 50,000 or more people, the county share, which for West Hartford is approximately 12 million, is coming directly to us as well. So all told, roughly $47 million. Again, the allowable uses, as we talked about during the budget process a month or so ago, and these are just the major categories I'm going to touch on. Number one, the money can be used to support a municipality's public health response as well as government operations. Number 2 can be used to replace revenue loss that a municipality may have had over the last couple of fiscal years since the onset of the pandemic. Recall, we are taking in some of this money for that purpose for next fiscal year, as well as to close out the current year as well. A third broad category, the money can be used to address negative economic impacts to individual workers, individual businesses, as well as the public sector more generally. A fourth category is the money can be used specifically for water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. That does include stormwater and drainage, very important capital projects for West Hartford, as the council is well aware. And then the last major category, less applicable to us as a municipality here in Connecticut, but premium pay for essential workers. So those are just the big broad categories. Recall, we presented some guiding principles that the town could employ, the council could employ with respect to the use of the funds. I think you responded favorably to these principles when we discussed them a month or so ago. But just again, a reminder, one would be to use a portion of the funding to reimburse lost revenue and to restore some key positions. And we certainly did that for next fiscal year and appreciate your support there. The next category, probably larger in terms of aggregate spending, would be to provide funding for projects and initiatives that would promote key policy goals of the council. And some examples we gave are in the category of sustainability and fiscal stability. Perhaps those are energy improvements, as an example, that are going to help us realize future budget savings. Another category was in the area of diversity, equity, inclusion. And I think the DEI officer and the other good work that Mr. Ledwith talked about is a good example of that. A third category was around economic vitality. How can we use the money to jumpstart our economy, which fortunately we're doing well here, but how can we employ it to just add that more vibrancy, if you will, including arts and culture. So what are some good examples there? Those could include strategic investments in our commercial areas, in our town center and elsewhere. Maybe improvements to infrastructure that would allow us to hold on-street events, bring more traffic on the street to benefit our merchants, our restaurateurs, and others. Working with our arts and culture community as well. A fourth category we talked about is under the area of health and human services. What more can we do to better position our community for public health crisis we might face in the future? Maybe that could include investments we would make in our Hillcrest area neighborhood outreach center. That's an example. Some strategic investments we could make in our health district. A fifth broad category was under the area of public safety, similar to the health and human services theme. What are some strategic investments we could make now in public safety equipment that would better position us to respond to these types of events in the future? And if we can use this money to acquire some of these assets now, it would save on some of our capital spend in the future. Next category was under the area of technology. Mr. Morin talked about this a little bit earlier this evening. What are some continued investments we could make in technology, whether it's in our parks, whether it's here at Town Hall, to continue to make our operations more efficient and effective and lead to future budget savings? And then last but certainly not least, what types of projects and initiatives could the council fund that would work to generally improve quality of life in town? And much of what I touched on already would certainly do that, but strategic investments in our parks, our public spaces, and our institutions. So those are the guiding principles we talked about a month or so ago, which I think resonated well with you and would want to hear more this evening. In terms of process moving forward, the town council, you would be in the driver's seat here in terms of approving all of the allocations. That is your role. Recall, you have until the end of calendar year 2024. We have some time. You have until that date to approve a plan. We do not need to spend all the money by that date, but it needs to be allocated by that point in time. So at a staff level, we're working on a proposal that we plan to submit to you next month. It's going to be a series of projects and initiatives that would comport with the guiding principles I just talked about. So you're going to get a series of recommendations from town staff through me, through Peter, next month. But then I also envision that you as the council would want to entertain some suggestions, some input from the community at large, perhaps in particular from our nonprofit institutions. So in terms of how you could do that, you could utilize one of your committees for that purpose. This committee, for example, could be an ideal venue. You could conduct some town hall meetings and a community survey. We were thinking at a staff level, perhaps it would make sense for the council to really encourage applications. We would almost have an application process, if you will, for initiatives that would help us recover from the pandemic and put us in a better position for future success. So I'd like to pause there, Mr. Chairman. I know I went on at some length. I think that was some important background, and through you would like to ask Mr. Privatera to talk more specifically about the amounts we've received and anything additional he'd like to add.
Thank you, Mr. Hart, for your comprehensive update there. Mr. Privatera. You're on mute, Mr. Privatera. 2 out of 3 ain't bad. You get another chance.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Pete Privatera, Finance Director. As the town manager stated, there are 2 pots of money. The initial allocation that came straight from the Treasury Department of the $25 million, we received $12,230,000. We've already received that money. For the second allocation under the county allocation, we were identified an additional $12.2 million. We have applied for half of that amount, $6.1 million. The application was completed and submitted on June 7th. A notification was sent to me basically saying, if we find any errors, we'll contact you right away. I haven't heard anything. My assumption is there are no errors, but it's taking a while to process. But both of those combined total about $18.6 million. So far, we've committed $4,135,000 to the fiscal 22 budget. We had discussed appropriating $170,000 to the risk fund to offset unemployment compensation that we were not reimbursed on. And my expectation is that we might use $200,000 to $300,000 to balance out the current year. So of the entire allocation of $37.2 million, the $25 million and the $12.5 million, we have unallocated roughly $32.5 million. Now again, we've received half of the 25 million, but we've already committed 4.1 million of that, and my hopes are we're going to receive the half of the second allocation, sometime in July. And as the town manager said, one of our calculations was to determine what our lost revenue was, and based on the federal calculation that we were told to use, we came up with about $8.3 million. And we've basically used 4.1 million of that. Just on a side note, when we discussed with the rating agencies the use of the $4.1 million, we made sure that we explained to them that by using that, we were not creating a structural deficit, that we had a plan in the future to mitigate that use of revenue. And the plan was that because of the low interest rate and the lesser amount of money we're going to borrow on the pension bonds, we're going to save considerably more than we anticipated to offset that usage of that revenue. That coupled with the fact that most of our employees are going to be moving over to the state partnership plan, the health plan, and our expectation is that we're going to save more money from that as well. So again, that's pretty much a quick overview of what we're receiving, what we've committed, and what is available for future appropriation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Privatera. At this point, I'd like to ask my colleagues if they would like to ask questions or comment on this particular topic. Mr. Sweeney?
I would just like to say thank you to the staff for putting together a very thoughtful process. I think it would be, I can't wait to see it in process. I know that there are a lot of folks that need some help right now. I know the town has some thoughts on things that we want to accomplish over the next couple of years, particularly on the infrastructure side, that I think that fall in the category of things that we can do. And I think that frankly that we should do and probably wanted to do for a little while. And this provides us an opportunity to do that. I also think that it's important that we engage the community's interest in this, based on the fact that it's it's their money that's going to work. And I think it's a really great opportunity for us to engage the residents, and thankful for the staff for putting together such a thoughtful process.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. Anyone further would like to comment or say something? Mr. Sweeney's the only person I can see, so I'll just go and call the people that are here by just your name on the screen. Mr. Williams, do you have anything you'd like to add? I guess not. Ms. Fay, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Yes, thank you,
Thank
Mr. Davidoff, through you. I think it was very prudent that we didn't allocate all the funds in one fell swoop, and that we can get input and be really thoughtful about how to apply what we have. I hope we make really, really good decisions with the rest of the available funds, and it would be great if at some point we could do something to help out the taxpayers in some fashion. Since we did pass on a modest increase this time, it would be nice to see if we can give them some relief. So those would be my comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Fay. I don't know if Mayor Cantor has the availability to participate. Mayor Cantor? I know she texted me. She may have only the ability to listen in and not communicate at this point. That being the case, the only thing that I would like to say is at some point I would hope that we would have a discussion with respect to vision and community needs, with respect to ideas that we could possibly flush out with respect to investments in different types of projects that we can just possibly brainstorm through and put forward with our residents as well. So some type of venue to allow us to do that, I think, would be quite helpful. I know that the mayor and I have had some discussions about a variety of items that would be maybe appropriate for the use of these funds, but obviously more details to follow because it's still very early in the process. So I'll just leave it at that. And I just had one other question. It's more of a technical accounting question to Mr. Privatera. So this additional money has come into the town coffers, and if you could just let the residents know as to where we park it, and obviously it's growing some type of interest, just not laying in some type of 0% account. If you could just let people know who may be watching as to how that, the mechanics of that, how that works.
Yeah, we deposited that in one of our pooled cash accounts. Unfortunately, the interest rate environment out there is not that great for short-term cash investments. But it is in our primary bank account, and I think we're earning maybe 20 basis points on it, which is not a lot, but it's better than the state treasurer's investment fund, which is currently earning 0%. So, my concern was that it's funny you should ask. I talked to a number of finance directors today, and I asked them, was there any concern that that we're earning interest on this money, because obviously the intent of it is not to invest it, but to use it. But there was no concern because all the other finance directors are putting it in similar short-term money market accounts. So we're doing what everyone else is doing at least that I spoke to. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gutierrez, because I was wondering if we were utilizing the STIF and what their rate was compared to what you identified was where we are putting it. And it'd be interesting to see if the federal government comes out with some type of ruling post-distribution as to any interest earned on these funds would be clawed back. So right now that probably isn't the thought, but I could see some communities in some places looking at it as, we could just wait until 2024, then we'll roll it out, and we will have incurred or we will have grown a significant amount of asset growth by this to do more projects. So I don't know. It seems like the American way. That seems like a good idea too, because it seems pretty ingenious, and as long as it's used for the right purpose, which we think, from our perspective, is economic development and vitality, and not really for shoring up budgets and budget stabilization, then I think we're headed on the right course. So. Are you all set for this evening, Mr. Privatera, on this topic?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. So, Mr. Hart, I think we've gone through all the items on the agenda. I didn't know if you had anything else for the good of the order.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Matt Hart, Town Manager. Just want to thank everyone for their time and attention this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. Ms. Fay? Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Fay. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, we stand adjourned. Thank you very much for your time. Greatly appreciate it. Great meeting, everyone.
Thank you.